Imagine this. The screen is pitch black. Slowly you hear the jungle, cicadas buzzing, leaves whispering, the humid air thick enough to almost feel it. The camera glides past towering trees, sunlight flickering through the canopy. And then, suddenly, out of the ground rises something massive. Not just a rock, a face. Carved in volcanic basalt, nearly 10 feet tall, weighing as much as a tank. Its eyes stare blankly forward, as if peering through 3,000 years of time. And you can't help but wonder, who carved this here in the middle of the Mexican jungle over 3 millennia ago? This is no trick of nature. It's the legacy of a civilization most people barely know, the Olmec. Too often overshadowed by the Maya or the Aztec, the Olmec were actually the foundation. The so-called mother culture of all Mesoamerica. From about 1200 to 400 BCE, when the Greeks were just beginning to write tragedies and Rome was still a muddy village by the Tiber, the Olmec were building cities, running long-distance trade, performing sacred rituals, and most importantly, laying down the blueprint for everything that came after in Central America. Think of it this way. If the Maya and the Aztec were the flashy, rebellious teenagers of the Middle Ages, then the Olmec were the strict, formidable parent who raised them. No Olmec, no Maya calendar. No Olmec, no Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan glittering in the middle of a lake. And yet here's the irony. Almost everything we know about the Olmec comes not from libraries or written chronicles, but from giant heads. Not skulls, but colossal stone sculptures, each weighing up to 40 tons. And if you're asking, how on earth did they move these things without wheels, horses, or cranes? Well, congratulations. You're asking the same question that archaeologists still argue about. What makes it stranger is that no two heads are alike. Each one has its own personality. Some stern, like a boss glaring at you about a missed deadline. Others calm, almost smiling, as if they're in on a secret. Many scholars think they were portraits of rulers, immortalized in stone to declare their power. Others suspect they could represent athletes from the sacred rubber ball game, a sport so brutal that surviving one match might just earn you a place in myth. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. A number of these heads were found deliberately buried. Why? Were they ritual burials of power? Or did the Olmec intentionally hide them, leaving behind the ultimate 1,000-year scavenger hunt for future generations? Nobody knows, and maybe that's exactly why they're so fascinating. Think about it. A civilization that ruled thousands of square miles, built grand ceremonial centers, and controlled vast trade routes. Yet today, the clearest trace they left are a handful of silent, colossal faces, staring up at us from the earth. Who carved them? Why do they look so strikingly individual, almost like ancient selfies in stone? And what secrets are locked behind those basalt eyes that have been watching for over 30 centuries? That's the door we're about to step through. The story of the Olmec, the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. At once familiar and alien, powerful yet mysterious. This is just the beginning of our journey back in time, where boring becomes fun, and history isn't just a textbook, but a living, breathing mystery waiting to be uncovered. Imagine wading through a dense fog in the jungles of Mexico more than 3,000 years ago. The ground is soft beneath your feet, the air heavy with moisture, and in the distance, the beat of ritual drums echoes through the trees. Somewhere in that misty world, a society was thriving, practical enough to survive, yet so mysterious that modern archaeologists still scratch their heads in frustration. To understand them, let's start with the basics. What kept them alive? Not giant stone heads, but farming. Corn, cacao, and taro root were the holy trinity that sustained the Olmec. Picture riverbank fields held together by small earthen levees, cacao beans so prized they doubled as currency. And yes, that bitter, dark bean is the ancestor of the hot chocolate in your Starbucks cup. Most remarkable of all, the Olmec learned to turn sticky tree sap into rubber balls more than 1,500 years before Christ. Imagine a perfect bouncing ball in a world that hadn't even invented the wheel yet. Strange? Absolutely. Brilliant, without question. Their society was anything but equal. At the top stood divine kings, Rulers who were not just politicians, but the sacred bridge between humans and gods. If the people believed their king could summon rain and guarantee harvests, his power was absolute. Below him, nobles controlled trade, turquoise, jade, and obsidian, the volcanic glass sharp as a razor, prized as both weapon and status symbol. Ordinary farmers toiled in the fields, but through sprawling trade networks, Olmec goods traveled far beyond their homeland. And every item carried more than material value. It carried ritual, story, and power. And if trade tied them together, religion was the backbone of it all. The Olmec worshipped a terrifying rain god with bulging eyes and fanged teeth, a corn god who embodied life itself, and most enduring of all, the feathered serpent, a creature that slithered on earth and soared through the skies. That vision would echo through millennia, reborn as Quetzalcoatl among the Aztec and Kukulkan among the Maya. Now picture this, an Olmec ceremonial plaza, the air thick with smoke and incense, drums pounding in unison. A king-priest emerges, draped in brilliant feathers, as the crowd kneels in awe. The ritual may involve offerings, or even human sacrifice. For the Olmec, blood was the thread that bound the human world to the divine. And sometimes, ritual merged with sport. The sacred rubber ball game wasn't for entertainment. It was cosmic theater. Each match symbolized light battling darkness, life contending with death. The winners were celebrated. The losers sometimes became the offering. Think of it as an ancient version of Squid Game, but deadly serious, with the fate of the universe at stake. The Olmec were also pioneers. They carved proto-writing, early symbols etched on stone, perhaps the first written script in Mesoamerica. They developed calendars based on the sun and moon, the forerunner of the 260-day sacred calendar the Maya later perfected. While much of Europe still wandered in prehistoric forests, the Olmec were already counting sacred days, choosing auspicious times for ritual. In art, they left behind haunting creations. The were-jaguar, half human, half jaguar, with slanted eyes and a grimacing mouth. Was it a king transforming in ritual? A symbol of supernatural power? We may never know, but it hints at a worldview where the boundary between man and God was perilously thin. Put it all together: corn, cacao, rubber balls, divine kings, the feathered serpent, early writing, blood rituals. And you don't see just a quaint tribe with a few big stone heads. You see the foundation, the bedrock, the mother culture of all Mesoamerica. Everything the Maya and Aztec would one day celebrate. The pyramids, the sacrifices, the cosmic ball games, sprouted first from Olmec soil. And that's why they've earned their chilling, powerful title, the mother of Mesoamerican civilization. Imagine this. You're pushing through the heavy, humid air of the Veracruz jungle in Mexico. The ground squishes beneath your feet, damp leaves crunch, and the smell of earth hangs thick all around you. Then you freeze. Rising from the forest floor is a massive face carved from basalt, nearly 10 feet tall, weighing close to 40 tons. Those stone eyes don't just stare. They feel like they've been watching this jungle for over 2,500 years. Cold, silent, and almost whispering. We were here long before you. These are the Olmec heads, among the greatest mysteries of ancient archaeology in the Americas. 17 of them have been found so far, and here's the uncanny part. No two are alike. Each face has its own personality, stern, enigmatic, even defiant. And all of them wear a rounded helmet, oddly similar to a modern football helmet. It might look funny at first, but don't be fooled. These weren't jokes. These were power, carved into stone. And then comes the million-dollar question. How? The basalt used for these heads didn't come from the swampy lowlands where they stand. It came from mountains dozens of miles away. No horses, no wheels, no cranes. Yet somehow the Olmec hauled blocks the size of tanks across rivers and forests. Modern archaeologists suggest rafts on waterways, wooden sledges, and sheer manpower. Sounds plausible, until you picture hundreds of laborers, dripping sweat, inching 40 tons of rock through mud. That's not just engineering. That's a society mobilized for a shared vision. Of course, humans never resist adding a dash of the supernatural. Some say these monuments are proof of ancient giants, or even extraterrestrials. The logic goes, too heavy, too advanced, must be aliens. Classic late-night History Channel logic. But the evidence says otherwise. Tool marks still scar the stone. Smaller practice sculptures exist. These weren't gifts from space. They were the work of determined human hands. What truly sets these heads apart isn't just their size, but their individuality. They're not generic gods. Each face looks like a real person. Maybe a king, maybe a warlord, maybe the ultimate sports hero of their sacred ballgame. In a way, they were the world's first monumental selfies. But here's the kicker. Carving one selfie required hundreds of workers, months of labor, and enormous resources. That means the person immortalized had enough power to command an entire society. These weren't just statues. They were declarations. I rule here. I matter enough to shape stone into my face. So what did the Olmec mean by these giant heads? Were they political propaganda, divine portraits, or simply eternal reminders not to forget them? Whatever the case, they succeeded. Because more than 2,500 years later, we're still here, staring back into those stone eyes, asking the same questions. Who are you? How were you made? And why were you buried beneath the earth, waiting for us to rediscover you? And maybe that's the real genius of the Olmec. By leaving us no written explanation, just these silent faces, they guaranteed one thing. Their mystery would never die. At once real and surreal, human and mythic, their heads are both a riddle and a legacy. Timeless stone whispers reminding us how small we are against history. The jungles of Veracruz, Mexico, wrapped in silence. The air is thick, damp, heavy with the smell of wet earth. The forest floor sinks softly beneath your feet, when suddenly, you freeze. Rising from the ground between massive tree roots is a colossal stone head, carved from basalt, nearly 10 feet tall, weighing close to 40 tons. Its stone eyes stare straight through you, solemn, unblinking, as if they've been watching time itself pass for more than 25 centuries. This is the legacy of the Olmec, one of the most mysterious civilizations of the Americas. By 400 BC, they had faded into the shadows of history. But their end was not like switching off a light. It was a slow-motion tragedy, written by nature, by war, and by the burden of their own greatness. First came the climate. Ancient Mesoamerica went through brutal cycles, years of drought that cracked the earth, followed by floods that drowned the fields. A society built on maize, cacao, and intricate irrigation systems could not survive long when harvests withered one season and washed away the next. Empty stomachs meant broken faith. And when the people no longer believed in the rituals, the power of their priest-kings crumbled too. But the sky wasn't the only enemy. From beneath the earth, volcanoes roared. Archaeologists have uncovered thick layers of volcanic ash covering Olmec sites, proof of devastating eruptions. One explosion could erase a thriving ceremonial center in an instant, like a tropical Pompeii. The ash itself became their obituary. And when the Olmec grew weak, their neighbors closed in. The Zapotec, the Meeks, and other highland peoples likely seized the chance. War in those days wasn't just about land. It was about resources. Cacao beans, volcanic obsidian sharp as razors, and control of vital trade routes. Against hungry rivals and burning cities, even basalt heads 3 meters tall offered no protection. Here's the cruel paradox. The very complexity that made the Olmec powerful may have doomed them. Their massive temples, extravagant rituals, and giant stone monuments demanded enormous labor and resources. In times of prosperity, this was a display of power. But in times of famine or war, it became a crushing weight. Like owning a luxury supercar, you look invincible while it runs, but one lost paycheck turns it into a burden you can't sustain. Yet the Olmec didn't vanish like the fabled city of Atlantis. Their culture dissolved into history, but it lived on, woven into the civilizations that followed. The Maya adopted the 260-day ritual calendar, a system so precise that even modern astronomers still marvel at it. The Aztecs later kept it alive, using it to time their ceremonies and divine the will of the gods. The idea of blood as cosmic fuel, sacrifices to keep the sun rising, was first kindled at Olmec altars. And the legendary ball game, with its heavy rubber ball symbolizing the sun's journey across the sky, also began here. It wasn't just sport, it was cosmic theater. To lose could mean death, but to play was to reenact the eternal struggle of life against darkness. So when the Maya, the Zapotec, and the Aztec rose to power, they carried Olmec DNA in their culture. Step pyramids, blood rituals, cosmic calendars, all of it had roots in the Olmec world. They no longer called themselves Olmec, but the ghost of their civilization lived on in every stone, every prayer, every ball game. That's why, when you stand today before a massive Olmec head in the jungles of Veracruz, you're not just staring at a relic. You're looking through a doorway, at a civilization that disappeared, yet never truly died. A people who chose immortality not through a name, but through the legacy that shaped all of Mesoamerica. The jungle of Veracruz, Mexico, utterly still. The air is thick and damp. The smell of wet earth clings to you. Beneath towering trees on a carpet of rotting leaves, a colossal basalt head rises from the ground. 10 feet tall, weighing nearly 40 tons. Its stone eyes stare straight through you, silent, unblinking, as if they've been watching centuries slip by without ever speaking a word. And in that moment, you realize you are face to face with the last whispers of the Olmec, a civilization that vanished more than 2,400 years ago. Around 400 BC, the Olmecs slowly receded into darkness. But don't imagine it like a sudden blackout. Their end was not swift. It was a slow tragedy, scripted by nature, by war, and by the weight of their own greatness. First came the climate. Mesoamerica swung through brutal cycles, endless droughts followed by floods that drowned the fields. For a people who survived on maize, cacao, and carefully built irrigation canals, this was disaster. Crops failed, stomachs emptied, and with hunger came doubt. When the people no longer believed in the rituals, the power of their priest-kings collapsed too. Then came fire from the earth. Archaeologists have uncovered thick layers of volcanic ash smothering Olmec sites, signs of violent eruptions. One explosion could erase a bustling ceremonial center overnight, a tropical Pompeii without a written chronicle. The ash itself became their obituary, and when the Olmec grew weak, their neighbors moved in. The Zapotec, the Mickey, and others surely seized the chance. War here wasn't just about land, it was about resources. Cacao beans as currency, obsidian blades sharp as razors, and control of coastal trade. Against hungry rivals, even stoneheads 30 tons heavy couldn't hold the line. But perhaps the cruelest irony is this: the very complexity that made them powerful may have destroyed them. Their temples, colossal sculptures, and lavish rituals required endless labor and resources. In prosperity, these were symbols of strength. But in famine or war, they became unbearable burdens. Like a glittering supercar, you look invincible while it runs. But the moment you lose your income, it turns into debt. And yet, the Olmec didn't vanish like Atlantis sinking into the sea. Their culture lived on, flowing quietly into the civilizations that followed. The Maya inherited their 260-day ritual calendar, astonishingly accurate even by modern astronomical standards. The Aztec later kept it alive. The idea that blood was the fuel of the cosmos, that sacrifice kept the sun rising, was first kindled at Olmec altars. And the famous ball game, with its heavy rubber ball symbolizing the sun's journey across the sky, that too began here. A game where losing could mean death, but playing was reenacting the universe itself. So when the Maya, the Zapotec, and the Aztec rose, they carried Olmec DNA in their culture. Step pyramids, blood rituals, cosmic calendars, all had roots in the Olmec world. They no longer bore the name Olmec, but the ghost of that civilization lived on in every stone temple, every ritual, every ball game. That is why, when you stand today before a massive Olmec head in the Veracruz jungle, You are not just staring at a relic. You are looking into a doorway to a civilization that disappeared, yet never truly died. A people who chose immortality not through their name, but through the legacy that quietly shaped all of Mesoamerica. And so, we end our journey with the Olmec. But this is not the end. Beyond these forests, the Maya will raise sky-piercing pyramids. And in the high Andes, the Inca will build cities in the clouds. Curious to uncover their secrets? Hit subscribe, ring the bell, and step with us into the next chapter of Lost Civilizations. History isn't over. It's only waiting for you to listen.